So now, piercings.
Okay. Well,
Keep in mind,
right.
I'm right here.
I'm looking at you.
Also,
Right.
is there any Leviticus's about piercings?
About piercings. No, actually, piercings is one of those that's actually really not mentioned.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like, there's some parts where it talks about, the marring or cutting,
Mhm.
which obviously a piercing would be technically that. But outside of the Lord instructing, he would instruct bond servants would willingly get a piercing in their
Okay.
ear to signify that they're remaining a bond servant to whoever they've decided to serve.
Okay.
Okay. And so they have a nail driven through their ear for that purpose. Okay. So, but as far as piercings, I think the exact same thing applies
Okay. As tattoos.
as tattoos that we
Okay.
just talked about. Like, it's the way that we're going to honor one another and honor the Lord in our piercings. I think the biggest thing is to understand that I am free, right? I'm free to go do certain things. Like Paul says at the beginning of the passage I read there in 1 Corinthians 6, all things are permissible, but are they really beneficial?
Okay.
And when he says all things are permissible, obviously those are not including like the 10 commandments, right? In other words, it's not permissible for me to go murder somebody.
Right.
But what Paul's saying is in these secondary issues, that's kind of what we're getting to. In these secondary issues, all things are permissible, but are they beneficial?
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the line that we need to take especially in response to the culture we're in.
So the culture of I don't care about your culture, because I feel like it can go both ways.
Right.
Like I can be too rebellious with the way I do things that are culture, but other people can also be too reserved or something.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that that's with the verse that you just said, how do I navigate that dynamic? Because there's people that want to be super normal, and then there's people that want to be super not normal. Whatever normal means for that culture. I was going to say,
what is normal? Yeah.
Yeah.
What does normal mean?
So, yeah.
So, in other words, you're asking how,
how abnormal to the rest of church community can I be before I become too disrespectful of the community?
Okay.
Or of the other people.
Okay. All right. No, that's okay. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. So Romans 15 verse 1.
Okay.
Now we who are strong have an obligation to bear the weaknesses of those without strength and not to please ourselves. Each one of us is to please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. For even Christ did not please himself. And so I really feel like a lot of this goes to the fact of we may have, and that's what I think what Paul's getting to, we have freedoms.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean we should, one, abuse those freedoms. And two, it actually, Paul's telling us here, for those that understand that they are free, you do not need to use those freedoms in such a way that's actually going to cause others in the community of faith to stumble.
In the context of tattoos and piercings,
okay,
am I ever going to cause anyone to stumble
because you have them?
Because I have them.
Do I? And by stumble, I think that kind of word's a weird churchy word too.
Yes.
I mean, Scripture even uses it. I mean, Romans 14:21. It says it's a good thing not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that makes your brother or sister stumble. Okay. So that we find that that's where people use that phrase. It's the English has translated that Greek word to stumble. And so do I think that you can cause people to stumble can we cause people to stumble by our freedoms? Yeah. That's a possibility.
Like if I got a tattoo that says you should do sins, that would be bad, right?
Okay. Like, if that's your tattoo, yes,
Okay.
because not good, because that's actually not honoring the Lord.
So if I covered my entire body with "You should do sins" over and over again in 500 different fonts, versus covered it entirely in flowers, or crosses, or doves, or
Right.
fig leaves, or arcs, or forbidden fruits, or other holy grails, that would be fine.
Right. Just Bibles everywhere.
Yes, just
no. I think what you're getting to is probably for a lot of people is not just what the tattoo is. It's just the fact that one is getting a tattoo.
Okay.
Like, in other words, I think probably you're going to find there's the camp that is like, we feel uncomfortable with tattoos. We don't like tattoos. And so it would not matter what the tattoo was.
Okay.
And then you're going to have those that are like, no, we're okay with tattoos. And so then there's a much more kind of broader range of acceptance of whatever you may get. That's obviously not saying go commit sin, right? And so, or go do sins. And obviously I think there's going to be another group as well who is okay with tattoos as long as they are quote unquote Christian. Right. It's a Bible verse. It's
in Chinese.
Yeah, in Chinese, or a pretty a trendy one for a while was getting Bible verses in Greek or in Hebrew, written on you. And so I think there's kind of going to be that camp as well. And I guess for me, I would say, like, to all camps, like, we've got to find a way to be gracious to one another.
Okay.
And so though Paul here is telling that those that know that they have freedom to do things, he's really imploring them, don't just be abusive in those freedoms, and don't rub it in the face of those who are who feel uncomfortable with some of those freedoms. And I think the challenge here, again, you get into cultural dynamics, depending on where you grew up, there'll be certain kind of expectations. I think you have generational gaps at times.
Right.
And so I think that it does become a little tricky in a local community of how to navigate those worlds.
So just go to another community that is cool with it.
Yeah. Well, and I do think sometimes that's why you do find communities like that, right? Like, in other words, you'll go into a community that's got one demographic, and it's just all of that demographic. I mean, maybe with some others kind of sprinkled in, but it's primarily that one demographic. And then you have another community that's just that one demographic. And I think I think that's unfortunate, because what it's doing is it's dividing along the line of these preferences, and it's not enabling us to stay together as a community, even though we have differences.
Has anyone said anything about me being on the podcast because I have piercings and tattoos with you, or at church?
No.
Cool.
Never.
All right. Well, we'll stay.
All right.